I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it and just flat out say it. I really hated my time with Armored Core V, not for the reasons many people hate it for, but for the simple fact that the project overall has a ton of really cool components and ideas that never coalesce into something strong. And while some do and others don't, the most disappointing thing about it is the lack of commitment FromSoft had for this game in the long run, and how playing it nowadays is just a fraction of the intended experience, something people like myself won't get to experience anymore. And it's a shame because I would have loved to play this game at its prime. Take the first two Dark Souls for example, games that came out in the same time frame as ACV and still have their PS360 servers open to this day, more than a decade later, excluding the PC version of one, which had to be permanently shut down last year due to the security vulnerability. And to be fair, given the popularity of the series, it's a no-brainer to still have them up, and as a matter of fact, Verdict Day servers are still up. But for ACV, which looked to have a pretty healthy community behind it, it had its servers shut down 2 years after release, which can honestly feel insulting for those who put large amounts of time in it. And now that this tangent is over, I say all of this because at its core, no pun intended, I really do believe Armored Core V had the best chances of succeeding thanks to a bunch of stylistic choices and gameplay rearrangements that further sought out to merge the principles of the older games into the new format of online play and have this war table approach, whereas the leader or member of a team, you had the opportunity to pair up with other players and depart in skirmishes. But the disparity in quality between single and multiplayer content make it one of the most puzzling entries in this series. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So please allow me to explain to you why I feel Armored Core V and to some extent Verdict Day have really solid ideas and how those clash with the series identity in a way that makes it trip itself on hard concrete and inadvertently cause a nosebleed.
Good morning. Main system. Checking pilot data.
Armored Core V takes place many years after the events of For Answer, where Earth has become a polluted and sparsely inhabited wasteland, with the last major settlement of human civilization being known as the City. a coastal city-state located in North America, to the south of a specially toxic region named the Contaminated Zone. The city is ruled by Father, a dictator who years ago ventured deeper into the Contaminated Zone and emerged with advanced weapon technology that later on went to be used to seize power of the remaining masses alive. Realizing that the city's limited resources had been stretched thin, Father institutes a harsh policy of apartheid, condemning countless people to the city's underground slums to relieve overcrowding. This alienates Father's lieutenant, Jack Beatty, who organizes other revolted members into the resistance and plots an end to Father's tyranny. There are two important things I need to tell you before moving on. First and foremost, I didn't beat the game. I just couldn't be asked to do it with how bored I was getting with the game later on, and I'll touch on that later. And second, this brief synopsis I searched on Wikipedia sounds cool as hell, because one of the things I've always admired about Armored Core settings with each of the installments is how throughout the games they depict different types of wars and how FromSoft uses those settings to either strengthen the overall presentation or have something to say about the conflict. From the first game up to For Answer, they've been using the motif of corporation proxy wars, often in ways that were very unorthodox or just as a backdrop for the gameplay. So for the first time, ACV seemed to somewhat distance itself from that concept and adopt a pseudo-guerrilla warfare narrative, especially as it's entrenched in this visually arresting art direction that seemed to replicate real-world conflicts as evident in the opening cinematic. So it's disappointing to see all of that potential squashed in-game, as the online focus doesn't allow that narrative to really flourish, and the way it's spread out in the main missions and random sorties you do as you get sent to different countries do a huge disservice to how poignant this could have been, potentially in the same level as For Answer or greater. And granted, I've played up to mission 6, and seeing how the game wasn't really pushing itself forward, I just packed my bags and left before I got even more disappointed. While ACV craps the bed in its execution of the story, the same can't be said about its visual identity, and oh my god, in terms of aesthetic, this game has it all going for it. Given the world has become a wasteland and the few alive willing to still fight a never-ending war, the game takes the interesting approach of not basing its imagery around fictional wasteland tropes like Mad Max or Dune, but instead taking inspiration from real-world conflicts, like stuff you see on the news, whether it be the horrifying genocide currently happening to Palestinians in Gaza, or when the US invaded Iraq back in 2003, that type of imagery. And when you see that backdrop contrasted with giant robots around it, it definitely gives a very anxious feeling the series hasn't seen so far. Now, admittedly, the game never makes more use of this concept for possible storytelling ideas, as it just mainly serves as a motif to paint the backdrop which we're currently combating in, and I wish they did more to really sell the general bleakness of war and the atrocities it brings, as I feel this can work in tandem with the general Armored Core formula, the same way For Answer did with its approach of multiple playthroughs to have the entire picture and force you to consider your answer within that repetition. In-game, that idea is also reinforced with how the game blends authoritarian, almost brutalist environments, mixed with wastelands and sci-fi designs that really turn it into something that is solely unique to itself, which is all accompanied by heavy post-processing that gives the game a very mucky look to it, with the grain almost obfuscating some of the extra clarity you could be having when facing other enemies, mixed with a desaturated color palette that avoids the usual grays and browns to be expected from war games, and mixes in just enough colors and gradients like sepia to make it pop in a way that works with the art direction. The attention to detail also deserves praise. In the sound design department, where your boosters sound like burning raging jets, the many use of synth-based sounds for the interface,
Main system activating combat mode.
to guns being so loud and more punchy than before, to the way the whole user interface glitches as you get damage. It's those tiny things that I love seeing attention being given to where you would expect the least. Gameplay-wise, Armored Core V seeks to return to the old formula of carefully curated missions where a more slow and methodical approach is needed to succeed than, as I alluded earlier, do all of this while also becoming online focused by merging both PvP and PvE elements into a singular hub where a team leader or member you get to pick up the skirmishes you want to take part on, whether it be battling AIACs, the random sorties you receive throughout the game, the main missions, and what I suppose was to be the main stage, conquest battles, where players intercept other players as they have to protect their targets, almost like a capture the flag, but the flag is destroyed permanently. I'd really love to be present at the time this game was thriving and see everything working in tandem, and as I've seen from YouTube, I have no doubt it must have been a lot of fun having your friends around and going to skirmishes where everyone has a role to play, similar to Chromehounds but not as hardcore as it is. And in terms of structure, to make all of this possible, the world map returns from Nexus, and just like that game, it splits assignments and arena matches into individual sorties. And at this point, it's worth acknowledging that the mailing system is a thing of the past now, especially starting from Gen 4, as the narrative direction doesn't really necessitate its inclusion when people can just hit you up in the assignment briefings themselves. Mechanically, ACs this time around are much smaller compared to previous entries. Movement speed is much slower and the general movement system is comparable to the first AC game, where much of the focus on Gen 5 is navigating through tight spaces intentionally designed for advanced movements, which sees you relying on your environments to scale surfaces and dash around the battlefield, almost like a grasshopper, and I really love how guerrilla it feels. Not just mechanically, but the feeling of executing those actions is very smooth. Like for example, jumping to the side of a wall and boosting across a big field without relying on your boosters, especially if you have reverse joint legs equipped. Or min-maxing much of the hurdles the game doesn't explain to you, like using scan mode so the boosters consume less energy. It's one of those movement systems where the more you really dig into it, the more skilled and proficient you become at it. Mission design is another story, and it can go both ways, as at its best, it balances a perfect mix of frenetic and guerrilla tactics that see some of the components from all gens combined into a hybrid that serves its purpose brilliantly, and at its worst, story missions in particular feel disjointed in their length, and to justify it, there's a heavy reliance on checkpoints which, while a good idea, it serves as an excuse to have you play through these long missions, where variety in combat encounters and enemy types is rarely present. It's so bad to the point one of the maps present gets reused more than 3 times for story missions, and not in a good way. 2 new additions Gen 5 brings is a scanner that tells you where to proceed and also gives you details on the enemy damage type, their parts, so on and so forth, as it replaces the general radar you'd have in older games. And overed weapons, massive overpowered weapons where they can only be used once. You have to holster all of your weapons or sometimes purge some of your body parts, and you really need to commit to the timer as its destruction capabilities can completely one-shot your opponent, which makes it a very high-risk, high-reward mechanic. But I can't really comment on it because they are unlocked after beating all story missions, and since I didn't finish all of it, I really don't have the experience to talk about it, so moving on. I really love the scanner because at first it can feel a bit awkward having to constantly shift between both combat and scan modes in your first hours with the game, but the more I got used to it, the more efficient and most times the crucial it became in determining my success or failure in the mission. The icing on the cake for me is the recon drones and the multiple types there are, as it allowed me to position myself in the best ways I thought around environments where I could see the enemy silhouette through walls. It's safe to say that in my first hours with the game I was really enjoying my time with it, and just like any Armored Core game, my focus was creating a build that could serve as a jack of all trades, but the further you get into the game, the harder the missions become, and that's to be expected. But unlike in the past, the increase for me came from a place where the customization system this time around felt more needlessly complex than it should have been, and part of that is derived from the multiplayer design, where the game expects you to have more people with you to alleviate the pressure you face during missions, but ever since the servers got shut down in 2014, it's much more difficult to commit to the game unless you're really dedicated, and you have no idea how badly I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. At first glance, the customization and economy present themselves in a friendly manner. To a point it even surprised me compared to how it has always been. Given the bleaker tone and the state of this timeline, your starter ACs are by definition Frankenstein machines, as they are made of multiple junk parts, and as you progress through the game, you'll earn new parts and slowly build a decked out AC. Mechanically, the game separates parts as junk and repaired variants, and the cool thing about it is that for every single part of your AC, you start with a junk variant for everything, whether it be for different leg types, arms, weapons and more, and the game lets you experiment with different parts when you don't have money, so that when you do find the perfect balance that works best for you, you can commit to higher quality parts. With my AC, for example, I went for a slower type build where I was using heavy reverse joint legs to jump higher thanks to the new movement system, and low consumption boosters that allowed me to boost for longer, and it definitely gave me the advantage I was looking for during missions. Where I was more worried about maneuvering environments instead of blitzing through everything like Gen 4. The change in customization that threw me off is the inclusion of 3 new damage types I genuinely never truly understood how to best optimize my AC for them, which are kinetic energy, chemical energy, and thermal energy. I feel like this change was mostly designed for the multiplayer component in mind, specifically PvP, where this system makes perfect sense as each part is perfectly tuned and balanced to fight other AC pilots, but in single player the balancing is atrocious. Before going forwards, I'd just like to preface that I'm not an expert on this and I may miss out on a few crucial details, but from what I understood after long hours of play is that your primary defense is tied to your legs, and for the rest you have to balance your head, core and arms around the new damage types. For example, if you use heavy reverse joint legs like me, you're susceptible to kinetic and thermal damage while having good chemical resistance, and trying to balance everything out for a jack-of-all-trades build makes it impossible as the different types of enemies you face in a single mission alone vary in the type of damage they output. That realistically, the way to surpass that hurdle is to constantly change your build for every single mission, which is just not realistic, and it slows down gameplay to a crawl. Weapons also suffer from the same system where you can face enemies who are very resistant to your damage type, taking twice the time to take them down as your HUD flashes ineffective as you shoot them. In this segment, I usually talk about how I feel about the music and a brief description of the people involved in it, and how they influence the soundscape of said game. So having said that, it was a shame I was unable to hear the music in-game and how they're supposed to play out, because Armored Core V has a very obscure bug where if you play it installed on an SSD instead of an HDD, music does not play at all, and in cutscenes, sound effects and music don't play whatsoever.
Father plans to deploy surveillance units in every part of the city. If they see anything suspicious, they'll start a ruckus that'll bring their friends running.
Since I have an SSD installed on my PS3, my entire playthrough was literally not being able to hear the tracks naturally, which sucked a lot. So from here on out, my opinions are solely based on listening the album without having the context of how they are used in game. For Armored Core V, the assemble team for this soundtrack is big. Not frequency, mind you, but identifiable faces such as Kota Hoshino, Tsukasa Saito, and Hideyuki Eto are present alongside a newcomer to the series named Yoshikazu Takayama, whose most recent works are as a sound designer on Dark Souls 3, Déraciné, and Elden Ring. Given the new tone, it was evident they couldn't rely solely on rock compositions, and were already past heavy electronic arrangements, so the approach they took was mixing rock itself with various other genres and subgenres, like orchestral, industrial, and a little bit of electronic sprinkled in, spanning 37 tracks across 2 discs, and man, this soundtrack is absolutely ambitious. The specific thing I particularly love about it is how certain tracks have these sort of chord progressions that use an array of instruments that are very uncommon, and how they all juxtapose themselves to deliver a track that feels unique and unorthodox. Take Lithium for example, as it mixes distorted synths with whatever the hell this instrument is that sounds so good. In a day where you have the mellow chord and the mix of distorted and hollow drums that at points borders into drum and bass, or how Meteor beautifully mixes these deep, ominous and esoteric vocals with a good dosage of guitar riffs and electronic synths. I swear, I could talk about the soundtrack all day. It's full of experimentation and tried and true methods that embrace what the series is all for. Ultimately, the thing that disappoints me the most in ACV is how lacking in content it feels. Not in the sense of what the game already offers, but the variety offered is so little compared to what the series used to deliver in the past. And the focus on the online components honestly hurt it in the long run, and granted, this is from the perspective of someone who didn't get to play the game when the servers were still active, but even so, solid game mechanics trapped in a story told very disjointedly, an assortment of missions that complement more the online play than the perfect curation from the past, and performance woes aside on the PS3, Armored Core V in my eyes is a disappointing entry. More than Nexus, where the only thing I can think about is what it could have been. Verdict Day, on the other hand, sounded like it could have fallen into the same trap and be stuck under the rubble ACV left behind, but to my surprise, it did just enough to redeem itself and pick itself back up to a position where you can see the game design finally shine, but not without its own faults.
Skirmishes broke out across the globe as the three forces struggled for world domination. Army numbers swelled, and the once proud mercenaries found themselves ostracized for refusing to take sides. The world had come back from the brink of destruction, but the fighting only grew fiercer. It was the eve of what would come to be known as the Verdict War. This is the forgotten tale of a lone mercenary.
Verdict Day is set 100 years after the events of Armored Core V, where much of the contamination surrounding Earth has begun to subside, exposing the Seven Towers, 20-kilometer tall structures containing ancient, highly advanced technology. Disputes over control of the towers have escalated into the Verdict War, which is principally fought between the three forces: Venid, an autocratic quasi-feudal state that wants to use the towers to build a world based on the principle of might is right; Sirius Corporation, a federation of resource-rich settlements that intend to administer the towers for the prosperity of all people; and Evergreen Family, a semi-theocratic organization that arose from the refugees who Francis Bethy Curtis led out of city a century ago, and which now seeks to restore the Earth's natural environment. A fourth major power is the Foundation from ACV, a research group who claims neutrality in the Verdict War and supplies the three forces with advanced weapons, including UNACS. Also of note, an enigmatic four-man Armored Core team called Reaper Squad sometimes intervenes in battles between the factions, attacking all combatants indiscriminately. Same story as ACV, I didn't finish Verdict Day and I won't comment on the story extensively. But from the 3 or so hours I played, it is very evident there's a very big push to mechanically bring this game more up to par with classic AC game design, and thematically retcon and bridge Gen 5 with a timeline established in Gen 4. And I see that as one of the biggest takeaways learned from V, which I have a lot of respect for. The last mission I played was the one where you're on a field where you can see the remains of Mother Will, And seeing that acknowledgement certainly brought a grin to my face, but other than that, I really don't have much to comment, so moving on. Maybe this was for the better, but the game takes a step back from much of the muckiness it was aiming with its visual presentation and becomes a more standard affairs canvas, which is respectable. And in most cases it helped to have that extra clarity during combat, especially in the case of this being a PS360 game, and how low resolutions and lack of anti-aliasing are usually present. But much of the visual language established in ACV is still present here, and like I said, I really liked it and don't got much to talk about it. In terms of significant changes, structurally the game remains the same as V, as you go through sorties in the game with story missions sandwiched in the middle. But the difference now is that there's a much stronger focus on strengthening the single player content where V lacked. In particular, missions where you had long stretches of combat and checkpoints to justify the playtime are now replaced by the more traditional structure the series is known for, and the environmental variety can definitely be felt as you progress through them. When it comes to actually playing this expansion, this entry is fucking difficult, y'all, and I don't say this lightly. The relationship I have with this series and difficulty is not so much the threat of that statement, but more so my stubbornness to adapt and see that mission through and through, no matter how sloppy I can get with it, and Nexus is proof of that. So the thing that really bothers me about Verdict's difficulty is simply how the customization, more specifically the new types of damages, fundamentally change how customization is conducted this time around. For a long time, the appeal of customization in these games for me has been the ability to change builds in accordance to mechanical adaptability. For example, swapping out to hover legs when going to water missions, a defensive heavy tank AC being better in a mission in a tight space, while a more nimble build will excel in a more open area. That kind of adaptability is what I love. But when customization becomes a statistics game where you have to appease to a system where constant big number is better, and it starts limiting your freedom of expression for builds you really want to experiment with, it just limits you significantly, automatically sucking out all of the fun present in building the ACs themselves. And like I said before, I believe this system must have worked really well for PvP matches, but for all offline single player content, the balancing isn't simply not good for me, and I just couldn't fathom keeping on playing the game. I feel like I now have a better picture of why these games are very divisive among the community. For some, the gameplay changes from 4 to 5 just seemed ridiculous and unjustified. For others, the new gameplay additions and the more tactical approach made them feel challenged, especially now with a strong online component that allows them to share that sentiment with other players. But for me, my biggest takeaway from both V and Verdict Day is that it could have been much more. More towards V actually, as the game felt like a stepping stone for many great ideas, but anything regarding content felt undercooked, and the lack of a cohesive implementation made it feel disjointed. While on the other hand, Verdict Day manages to fix much of the complaints that I had with V, but in doing so the general balancing just threw me off so much that instead of keeping on slamming my head against the wall, I just chose to simply drop it and move on, which is a shame, but it's simply not for me. And there we go, ladies and gentlemen. We've managed to cover most mainline Armored Core games on this channel, which I'm really happy about, and while I didn't manage to hit my target of this video dropping before the release of Armored Core 6, as it's been more than 2 months already at the time of writing this, I can't lie that I had a lot of fun playing through this series and see just what From Software has been cooking throughout the years, and finally getting to experience what a melting pot of ideas this series has offered so far. So, having said all of that, join me next time as we delve deep into Armored Core 6 and see how a decade plus of experience and expertise from their other games has not only influenced 6, but also how it could have meaningful ramifications for the rest of the series moving forward. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, share with your friends and activate the bell so you can get notification of my latest video. And thank you for watching.